Throughout the night, we've been encouraging viewers and listeners to join our social media forum and submit a question for the candidates.
But just how does social media really impact a campaign and how it operates? KUHF reporter Edel Howland asked the experts, can social media sites like Twitter and Facebook win an election?
Political consultant Alan Blakemore would certainly say social media has its place in a modern political campaign.
It does humanize the candidates and it does help them develop a personal relationship with the voters.
But does it mobilize those voters to exercise their democratic right at the polls?
There is no substitute for a candidate speaking to people, looking them in the eye, shaking their hand.
Blakemore has won 307 out of 355 campaigns that he's worked on, so you could say he's done his homework on how to reach potential voters. However, if you're looking at social media on a smaller scale, it's a slightly different story. Justin Concepcion is Mayor Annise Parker's social media coordinator. He believes Facebook and Twitter were vital to Mayor Parker's 2009 campaign.
We were able to get our message out to all different types of people that probably didn't know who Annise Parker was. At the same time, we capitalized on that for donations and whenever we needed volunteers.
So it does work, sort of, says Rice University's Chair Political Science Mark Jones.
I think it works with small concentrated populations, and that could be a small group at the local level to get them to turn out in city council elections or state representative elections.
But there's a caveat when using Facebook and Twitter.
It's less effective in reaching more casual voters and people who aren't particularly interested in politics.
And they're the voters that every campaign wants and needs to win an election. If Facebook or Twitter can eventually reach them, then it's a bonus to any candidate. Either way, Jones says social media is here to stay, and if you're running a political campaign, you'd better embrace it or risk being left behind.
They are an increasingly important form, and since they're relatively inexpensive, it would be short-sighted of any campaign not to have at least a strong social media component to its broad overall efforts.
These are the things that keep the political industry alive and on its toes.
And Adele joins us now, and you were actually upstairs with the bloggers as they were looking at Twitter, looking at Facebook.
What were the topics, what were the themes that were coming out of that social media conversation?
It was absolutely electric all evening, absolutely electric. And I have to say, again and again, it was immigration, it was education, and it was healthcare. Over and over, Medicaid, reform, education, student loans. And people they really feel like they want answers on those questions.
Well, we have all the candidates back with us now. Each of them will have 30 seconds to answer the same question. And Adele, let's start with a social media question.
Okay, one of the questions that came up, and I will ask it to all the candidates, but I'm going to start with Mr. Dewhurst. The question is that with the cuts to women's reproductive services that have happened in Texas, what do you as candidates do? How would you like to motivate women to pick you as the candidate?
Well, I'm asking for the votes of all good Republicans for my candidacy for the United States Senate. And the reason I'm saying that is because I'm proud of the fact that we defunded Planned Parenthood, but we have found the money to fund the 130,000 women that were covered under Planned Parenthood. We've decided not to use an abortion provider. And so we're going to provide the same or better health care from the 4,000 health care providers out throughout the communities in Texas by using state dollars. We're tired of the federal government sending down mandates and telling us what we need to do.
All right, Mr. Hubbard?
I think it's absolutely embarrassing that we're having to discuss whether or not women can make their own health care decisions. Until recently, my wife didn't have health insurance. So she went to Planned Parenthood for her annual exams. She wasn't going there to get abortions, she was going to get cancer screenings. And I think we should keep a commitment to Planned Parenthood because they provide invaluable services to low-income women and women with no health insurance.
Okay.
And Mr. Leopard.
I'm against funding Planned Parenthood. The government shouldn't be in that business. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm strong pro-life. I will also tell you, though, that I was raised by a single mom, and she had a tough deal. What she was concerned about were opportunities. What we need to do, and I think what women and men all over Texas are concerned with, is an economy where they're worried about their jobs. They've seen the fiscal mess in Washington. They've seen career politicians and people who talk about creating jobs or cutting spending, and they haven't done either one of them. I think what people want to do is ensure that not only themselves, but in generations to come, there's going to be real opportunities out there. That's what they're worried about.
Mr. Sadler.
I support a woman's right to health care, including Planned Parenthood. I think this is a ridiculous argument, frankly. There's both a federal and a state statute that prohibits the use of those funds for abortions. Every nonprofit in this state, almost every corporation, and even the state of Texas has dedicated revenues that can only be spent in a certain way. And we don't defund the whole state of Texas because somebody disagrees with it. This is not an unusual practice. This is a very valuable service for women, and we should be supportive of it. And it's wrong, the position that we're taking as a state.
Mr. James.
You know, I think that, again, this is one of those issues here to where you're talking about freedom and the right for women to have health care and their options in life. I'm all for that. I'm not for funding Planned Parenthood. I'm not for funding from taxpayer dollars abortions. And I think that that's a strong pro-life stance, and I will stick with that. But ultimately, what we've done here is we've gotten off on a plank talking about social issues, which are important to women. I understand that. But we also have to be mindful of what really we should be focused on, which is the economy and jobs.
And Mr. Cruz.
I'm strongly pro-life, and I have a proven record of defending the right to life. You know, one of the lies you hear in the media is that women are pro-choice. The significant majority of women are strongly pro-life. When the state of Texas had a law prohibiting taxpayer funds from going to Planned Parenthood, a federal court struck it down. And I argued before the Federal Court of Appeals defending that law and unanimously won before the Court of Appeals upholding that law. I'm honored to have the support of over 200 Republican women leaders across the state, and what they're concerned about is the future and the debt and spending that is taking away the future of all of our kids.
Mr. Hubbard, we're going to go to you next, work our way down and come back. This question comes from a member of the Greater Houston Partnership. The Texas population is projected to double from 25 million to 50 million over the next 30 years. What will you do as senator to help Texas manage the demand for services?
Well, I think one of the things we need to do is ensure that we're properly funding things like public education. That increasing population is going to include a lot of kids that need to be educated. So I think we have to keep our commitment to our students. Like I was saying before, we have to send them a message that education is important and not cut that first. So I think that's the best thing we can do for the growing population, as well as address our water problem with funding for desalinization plants and things of that nature.
It all comes back to the economy. The reality of it is, and I saw it as mayor of Dallas, but I can also tell you it's the same thing at the state and federal level. Unless you have a strong growing economy, you can't provide the services that you need. What we need to do is ensure that we've got people in Washington who understand and have been there, have made those tough decisions on cutting spending to get our economy going, but also understand how to create jobs. If we've got a strong economy, that's where it all ends up being. If we don't have a strong economy, then time and time again, we're going to have to make those difficult choices that we've been unable to make in Washington.
Not only will our population double, the demographics will be that we'll have an increasing population over age 65 and under age 28. That means more children and more seniors needing health care. That's why it's particularly troubling to me that we cut $5.2 billion out of public education and didn't fund it. And it's even more troubling to me that we didn't fund the last 4 years of our health care system with Medicare in this state. We have a growing population, growing demographics, and we as a state need to set the priority of our state on our people. A growing economy certainly helps. It is imperative. We have one of the best economies in the country, but we cannot ignore the needs of our people in both education as well as health care.
Mr. James?
Yeah, there's no doubt we need to absolutely have education. You know, I've talked to you about that earlier, my plans for that. But since 1980, 60% of all jobs created in this country have come from small business owners like myself. We have got to find a way to fight back and fend off the federal government's intrusion into the state of Texas. I mentioned the EPA earlier. We talked about that. We know for a long time that in Texas we're going to have oil and gas that we need to drill. We need to be able to go do that when we have it to provide the jobs for the men and women of this state. We also need to go and we need to look at the infrastructure. The highway money that we send to Washington, why do we need a middleman? We send up a lot and get back a portion. That just doesn't make sense to me.
And Mr. Cruz?
You know, the best source of opportunity is education and a job. The Obama administration's war on jobs, the boot on the neck of small businesses, is stripping away opportunity. And we need to remain a land of opportunity. You know, the question that I asked, can't we just increase social services to take care of people? You know, when my dad was an 18-year-old immigrant in Austin, not speaking English, I've said many times, thank God some well-meaning liberal didn't come put his arm around him and said, let me take care of you. Let me give you a government check. Let me make you dependent on the government. And by the way, don't bother learning English. Look, the key to opportunity and the American dream is hard work and a job, and that's what we need to get back to.
And Mr. Dewhurst.
Between 2000 and 2010, our population grew some 25%, from 20 million to 25 million. The estimates, as you mentioned just a moment ago, are that our population is going to double over the next 25 years. We need to do over the next 25 years what we've done over the last decade. Over this last decade, with Governor Perry, we've cut state spending 10.7% if you factor in inflation and population growth. We've cut taxes 51 times. We've got to turn this whole economy around. We need to take the Texas model to Washington and keep our spending low, our taxes low, balance our budget, kill Obamacare, and create stability. That's the key for the future. Create stability so our businesses and our investors will invest and create millions of new jobs.
We have a lot of questions from social media. We're going to go to one right now that was emailed to us, I believe, from John Micus from Houston. Will you support making all levels and types of income subject to the Social Security tax? And let's start with Mr. Sadler.
Well, that's a very good question, because currently we cap the amount that we tax for Social Security about $106,000. And that means when we built this system, about 90% of our income we captured through the Social Security tax. Today we're only capturing about 80%. And certainly one of the issues that we have to look at is increasing that revenue stream and getting back to the original framework of Social Security, which is raising the percentage of income that is taxed above. If you earn less than $106,000, 100% of your income is taxed. If you earn over $106,000, you're only paying that tax on the first $106,000, and everything above that is not being paid. And so it is the loss of the 90% down to the 80%, which is putting pressure on revenue. That's just part of our Social Security problem, but the question is very enlightened and very good, actually.
Mr. Leopard.
What we need to do is reform the program in total. We can do the little pieces on the side, and that's not going to do it. I oppose that. I oppose the question. What we really need to do is change the program, and we've proposed 3 ways to do it. One is ensure that current retirees have those benefits that they've been promised. Then, for folks that are younger, make sure that we increase the retirement age, and then we get people to work, to provide incentives to continue working. And then for younger people, have a personal account, change the system in total. Unless we do that, then what we're doing is just eating around the edges, and we can't afford to continue to do that.
Mr. James.
I'm not for raising taxes on any of that. Matter of fact, the government has proven that it's irresponsible with the money that they have there, taking money from the Social Security system that's going bankrupt in and of itself. I'm all for empowering the young population to have a chance to manage their own dollars and to control their own fate in the future. So you're paying in, and as you're a young person, you understand that in the future you got a chance for the money to be there, and it's all on your back and personally responsible. But this government has got to find a way to leave the money alone. We cannot touch it if you're 55 or older. Leave it alone because the people are there and expecting it.
Mr. Cruz.
In order to save Social Security, we need fundamental reform, and I'm campaigning on fundamental entitlement reform. No, we should not raise taxes, Social Security taxes. I strongly oppose that, but you know, every Republican is going to say he or she opposes raising taxes. The question is, what is your record? And that's what voters need to look at. If you have a politician who says, I will cut taxes, or I have cut taxes, in the state of Texas, taxes in the last 8 years have gone up 49%. Texans pay 49% more in taxes today than we did 8 years ago. We've got to look at the record, because it's easy for incumbent politicians to talk a good game on the campaign stump. Every one of us has been burned by politicians that do that, go to Washington, and then don't stand and deliver.
And Mr. Dewhurst.
Well, let me tell you the truth. Over the last 9 years, I've helped pass 51 tax cuts, which have cut $14.6 billion in taxes that businesses, homeowners, and Texas taxpayers pay. Governor Perry and I have worked very, very hard to keep our spending as low as possible. I agree with Craig. I wouldn't raise taxes on the Social Security portion. We don't need to raise taxes. We need to put the money back in that our Washington politicians have stolen out of the Social Security lockbox. And the way we do that is to grow our economy. Some of the Democrats want to raise taxes. I want to cut spending, and I want to grow our economy. If we grow our economy from the 2.1% to just a little bit higher to our historical.
Well, as the youngest person up here, it's an issue that concerns me probably more than anyone. And I have a 4-month-old daughter. I want to make sure it's there for her. And I'm glad that Mr. Dewhurst here believes in the confidence fairy. And I'm glad Mr. James believes that everyone has perfect information and can invest their money wisely. But as we've seen with the Great Depression and our current recession, that economic collapses happen. And I'm not willing to risk the retirements of millions of Americans. So I think we should raise the cap.
Mr. James, we're going to start with you on this round. This is a question from Mary Techmeyer. There has been a lot of gridlock in Congress, compounded with some exasperation and an inclination to throw out all the incumbents. If you were elected, would you either build consensus or would you vote on party lines?
Well, they've got that right about the gridlock. Someone asked me the other day, would you support Senator Jim DeMint, the Tea Party activist? And I understand who Jim is. And I said, I'll support anyone who will defend the Constitution and free markets. I don't think they understood that. What I meant was, I'm not going up there with the mindset to get behind anyone, but to go lead and to use the skills that I have used to be successful in my business life up there, to get people to understand what made this country great. And it was free markets, and it was the Constitution, and it was the 10 Commandments. That's what made this country great. And people up there, I think they're looking for a fresh breath of air to come from someone from the outside. I really believe that.
Mr. Cruz?
You know, the problem in Washington is not too much principle in Republicans up there. I'll tell you, I think the Senate is really at a tipping point right now. The 5 strongest conservatives in the U.S. Senate, in my opinion, are Jim DeMint, Mike Lee, Rand Paul, Pat Toomey, and Tom Coburn. And I'm the only candidate in the country all 5 have supported. And every one of them gave the same reason. They said, we need reinforcements. If we can double the number of the strong free market constitutional conservatives, if we can grow that to 10 or 12 or 15, it'll transform the Senate. That's what it'll take to drive a strong conservative agenda, to repeal Obamacare, to dramatically shrink the size and power of the federal government, to open up our federal resources, our natural resources to exploration, to have fundamental tax reform. It will take strong conservative leaders who will stand and fight.
Mr. Dewhurst.
Contrary to the previous speaker, I'm a Washington outsider. I'm proud that I've been endorsed by lots and lots of Texas conservatives. I'm proud that I've been endorsed by Governor Rick Perry enthusiastically, by Governor Mike Huckabee, by Michael Reagan, so many others. What we need to do is send Barack Obama back to Chicago, elect 4 more good conservatives to the United States Senate, have a majority, and turn this country around.
Mr. Hubbard.
Well, I think Mr. Dewhurst just showed us what the problem is. You've got Senator Mitch McConnell and a lot of Republicans in the Senate. Their #1 goal is to do away with President Obama. It's not getting good paying jobs for Americans. It's not fixing public education. It's getting rid of President Obama. And that is a big problem that's causing the partisanship and the gridlock in Washington. But I think also getting a fresh set of ideas, a new generation of leadership that's not tied into the same old political battles, as well as campaign finance reform, so that our representatives are indebted to the voters, not the special interest.
Mr. Leppert.
It's very, very clear. I'll do the same things that I've always done on both the public and the private side. I've never compromised principles, but I've always got people to come over because I've got an experience base and I put solutions on the table. Now, this race is pretty clear. We can elect a professional politician, a career politician by his own words, somebody that's got all the lobbyists behind him, or someone that's never led anything, that's been a staffer and never been involved in business. Does anybody believe that that's really going to be the game changer in Washington? What we need to do is have people who are committed to making the tough decisions and have made those tough decisions before, not wedded to lobbyists, and actually know something about business because they've been there.
And Mr. Sadler.
I think you've just seen Washington in action. How many times have you heard the word Republican this, Republican that, conservative this, liberal that? Issues don't have Republican and Democratic labels. Children don't have an R or a D on their forehead. What you have in government is a problem. And that problem has a solution. And that solution can come from the most conservative member, it can come from the most liberal member, but as long as you're searching for the solution, you will find good legislation and you'll solve our problems. That's my history. I served with a Republican Senate, a Democratic House, Republican governor, Democratic lieutenant governor. Passed legislation throughout. 4 times on the 10 best list out of 6 sessions. I've done this before, but you don't do it by calling each other names.
I think our time is up. Thank you. I'll warn you on this next question. You're on a college campus. Eric Ross from Houston asks, how will you address the high interest rates on student loans? Mr. James.
Okay, so let's put us in the business of this deal. If the federal government walks in and just wipes out all of that debt, $1 trillion that are on the books, how fair is that to the folks who loan them that money? It's not fair. So I think we need to leave the government out of the business of trying to tell us what we're going to do with our debt in this country. Get out of the business of banking and let those who are in the business of it go and sit down with those students who they made the deal with. This table right here, we want to make a deal with you because you can't make your payment, right? Well, let's figure out, let's restructure that. But again, this is a whole concept of the federal government thinking they're going to walk in and tell industry how they should act. I totally disagree with that. You've heard me talk about free markets a while ago. I am 100% behind free market and those folks who loan that money out. That's what I believe in.
Mr. Cruz.
Craig is exactly right. The simplest principle of economics is there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. We need to let the marketplace work, and the problem with student loan rates is not that the government isn't regulating. The problem is that a lot of students coming out of college don't have jobs because there are 25 million people in this country out of work, and the reason is the Obama administration has waged a war on jobs, one policy after the other, whether it's the XL pipeline that killed tens of thousands of jobs when this administration stopped it. We need to remain and get back to the land of opportunity where jobs come from small businesses. You know, we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. U.S. corporations have over $1 trillion of capital overseas. If we slash those rates, that money comes back and is invested in our country, which creates new jobs for students.
Mr. Dewhurst.
Thank you. The current proposal which is being circulated is to add $6 billion to our deficit in order to reduce the cost of student loans. You know how much that is per person? That's $7 a month. My recommendation is just cut back on 2 lattes a month, all right? Let's not add, this is not the time to be adding more debt to our national deficit. And I say that as a lifelong businessman, as the only one at this table who's cut billions and billions of dollars worth of government spending, the only one at this table who's cut taxes repeatedly, the only one at this table who's balanced 5 budgets without raising taxes, run TV against Obamacare, is a veteran and served abroad in the CIA.
Mr. Hubbard.
As I mentioned earlier, my wife is 34 years old and still paying on her student loans. I don't think the issue is so much the student loans, I think it's the cost of higher education. And the best thing we can do for students is reduce that cost by shifting our priorities in spending and financing more of the public education system, the higher education system.
Mr. Leppert.
We need to get government out of student loans as well as a whole host of other things, because whenever they go into it, they obscure the markets. The real key is not that interest rate, but the real key is making sure that there's opportunities for our young people as they come out of school. Today it's estimated that the unemployment, underemployment rate of people coming out of college is 50%. It doesn't matter what the interest rate. If we continue going on 50%, it questions the viability of a college education. Let's get the government out of it. For too long, the government's overregulated, overtaxed, and overspent. Get the government out of it, grow this economy, that produces opportunities, and I can tell you then, college education is a viable investment at that point.
Mr. Sadler.
Mr. Dewhurst, you're incorrect. I passed the largest property tax cut in the history of our state. It actually had my name on it. You don't have your name on a single tax cut because you can't introduce legislation. You don't stand on the floor and argue it. You two are both correct. It's the higher cost of education as well as not finding a job that's creating the problem. The issue that's before us today is whether or not the existing student loans at a 3.6% rate is expanded up to 6%. We need to keep it at 3%. It's a hard enough time for young students coming out. They're paying 7, 8, sometimes 10 years to pay off college loans. We need to keep that.
We've got another question from coming in from email. Hilda Granadino from Spring. Where do you stand, and this has sort of been addressed already, where do you stand on reproductive rights laws? And we're going to start with you, Mr. Cruz. I
am strongly pro-life. I think we need to be unequivocal, defending the right to life from the moment of conception until natural death. And this is an issue on which I have a proven record. As the Solicitor General of Texas, I served under Greg Abbott, the finest Attorney General in all 50 states. And I was honored, alongside with General Abbott, to lead a coalition of states before the U.S. Supreme Court defending the Federal Partial Birth Abortion Act. And we won 5-4. We also defended parental notification laws before the U.S. Supreme Court and won unanimously, which protects the rights of parents to take care of their kids, of their daughters, and to help them with difficult, challenging decisions in life.
Mr. Dewhurst?
I have always been pro-life. I'm proud of my pro-life record. I've been endorsed by all of the large pro-life organizations here in the state of Texas. When I came into the legislature in 2003, one of the first pieces of legislation I passed was the Defense of Marriage Act, and then we passed the parental notification, then the parental consent, and then the woman's right to know, where a woman is receiving information and has a 24-hour cooling off period. And then we became the only state in the country in which we made it a tort to harm an unborn baby. Then we passed the sonogram bill this past year. Texas is the most pro-life state in the country, and it's in large part to Governor Perry, myself, and the fine conservative members of the legislature.
Mr. Hubbard?
I have a mother, a sister, a wife, a daughter, a niece, and another niece on the way. I trust women to make the right decisions about their reproductive health. And I don't think a group of men in Washington or a group of men in Austin should be making those decisions for them.
Mr. Leppert?
I'm strongly pro-life. To me, it's a faith issue, and it's very clear. God is our creator. Life comes from God. You have to be pro-life. As I said earlier, I don't compromise on that. I will also tell you that I've taken that strong position before I was in elected office and after I was elected office. I was never a staffer. I put myself out. As mayor of Dallas, I took a strong position on this, and I was criticized by the local paper. I'll tell you, that's criticism that I was happy to have.
Mr. Sadler?
Probably no other issue has people of faith on both sides more than this issue. I'm a person of faith. I'm a Christian. But I also believe a woman has the right to determine her own health and what happens to her body. And I support a woman's right to choose, along with her family, her doctor, her counselor. And I'm not embarrassed about that. And I don't have a problem with that with my Christian faith. There is room in our faith to disagree on that.
Mr. James?
I've already said that I'm 100% pro-life, and while we're on this social plank, I'm going to kind of go out a little bit more on this thing and talk about what I think is a problem in this country, and that is the moral fiber of our country is in a rapid decline. It's not the country that I grew up with, where you opened the door for a woman, you said, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and please, and thank you. And I believe as Christian and as leaders of this country and what we're doing, if we're so blessed to have the part that we are, it is our responsibility to allow freedom and opportunity, but not to go at the point of life. I'm 100% pro-life. And I'm not trying to be America's pastor. I'm not trying to be the Sunday school teacher. But I do have a core value system that last time we did this thing, I was kind of challenged on that. And I will never apologize for my faith.
All right, going to have a short question on this one. Where do you stand on the DREAM Act that's going to allow some immigrants here right now illegally to be able to qualify for permanent residency? And we're going to start with Tom Leppert.
You know, part of it is everybody understands in Texas what the word illegal means. Unfortunately, Washington doesn't understand that. I'm for legal immigration, but I'm against illegal immigration. I'm against the DREAM Act. We need to solve this problem. I'm against amnesty. Laws need to be respected and obeyed. We need to eliminate the incentives for illegal immigration, and we need to protect the borders. We need to secure them, not by politicians making speeches and trying to one-up each other, but by practical solutions.
We're going to move right on to Mr. Sadler.
I support the DREAM Act unequivocally. A child that's here through no fault of its own, has attended school, been successful, perhaps even served in the military, and you're going to deny them citizenship, a pathway to citizenship? That's a matter of fundamental fairness. We're a big country with big shoulders. We can handle this, and we should be. It's only fair, and it's only right. These children were brought here. They were brought here, and they've succeeded. There's no
Mr.
reason
James,
for
the
us to
time is up
punish
there.
them.
Thank you. Mr. James.
Yeah, but they're breaking the law at the end of the day. And if we're going to say we're going to honor the Constitution and the rule of law, you're breaking the law, bottom line. Yes, these are men and women, boys and girls who came here under situations where their parents brought them. And I know many of them, and they're good students, and they're trying as hard as they can. And I have tried to help them before they became illegal. But at the end of the day, I told them, look, you're breaking the law now. So we've got to secure the borders, as I've talked about earlier.
We're going to stop there. Mr. Cruz,
let them
please.
come back in the right way.
I don't support the DREAM Act. I think we need to do everything humanly possible to secure our borders. I categorically oppose amnesty. And I think we need to support legal immigrants who come here following the rules, seeking the American dream. Amnesty is wrong. It's contrary to rule of law, and it's not fair. And you got to look past the rhetoric on this issue. Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst last session killed a bill that would have ended in-state tuition for illegal aliens, and he did it by assigning it to a Democrat.
We'll hear from you now. Mr. Dewhurst, please.
I was about to say that I agree with everything that Ted said until the end. What Ted doesn't, or he conveniently forgets, is that we have a strong Republican majority in each of our committees, Ted. But I agree that we're all from someplace else. But at the end of the day, I don't support the DREAM Act. I don't support amnesty because I don't think it's fair, Paul. I really don't think it's fair. People are standing in line in different countries, and they're following the law. And therefore, if someone wants to be a citizen, they need to go home and they need to apply.
Hubbard.
Very quickly, Mr. Hubbard.
Yes, I support the DREAM Act. I think it only makes sense to reward people who have served in our military, and those who have gotten a college education, keep them here to be productive in our economy. And so I think that's the right thing to do, is pass the DREAM Act.
All right, thank you so much. Well, on behalf of Houston Public Media and the Greater Houston Partnership, thank you for tuning in on television or the internet or listening on the radio.
We hope tonight's program helped you make an educated and informed decision regarding the candidate you will vote for in the upcoming election.
And remember, the primary election for United States Senate is May 29th, with early voting beginning in just 11 days. Get educated about the candidates and the topics and make your vote count. On behalf of Houston Public Media, Dave Failing, Laura Johnston, and myself, Ernie Manous, have a good night.